Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
So I'm Tim May. I'm the host of the AI Meetup, and we had a guest speaker, Matthew Denman, coming back today. If anybody saw the AI Meetup note I sent out, Matthew's had some transportation problems, and so he's going to either not make it or be very late. Eric has jumped in. He's going to tell you a little bit about what he's doing, and I thought so we'd do a little bit of that, and then perhaps we could have a bit of a open session with questions, and we just explore things AI-ish. And we got a lot of expertise in the room, and so we could probably handle almost any kind of question that comes up. If you guys are interested, there is an AI Meetup group on meetup.com. You could join that, and you could get forewarning of what speakers are going to be if they show up, kind of thing. And we'll go from there. Any questions before we get started? No? All right. Okay, Eric, take it away, and we'll
So first and foremost, my name is Eric Cabrera, and I work with some investors here in Las Vegas that are big into tech and AI. So, of course, I found myself here joining you guys, and I met Timothy while he was speaking. And first of all, I think it's really awesome that everyone kind of gathers here to learn. So I'm curious, how many of you use GPT on a regular basis? On the front end, like the application side. And how many of you are familiar with the API? Okay, just a couple of you. So recently, GPT released a new version called 4.0. And if you're familiar with GPT and you've been using it previously, you'd understand that it did have some limitations in when you're trying to use it and scale it. And you deal with hallucinations sometimes, or quite frankly, the load. And as it becomes more popular in the market, the virtual attention span seems to be going down. Now, what GPT just recently did when they released the new version is they cut the cost of the tokens literally in half. And that helps anyone using the API on a regular basis. And they released more features. And these features are extremely user-friendly. So I'm curious, to some of you that said that you use GPT, what do you use it for in personal or business?
Writing git commit messages, because I don't want to say I changed this.
Generating copy for websites.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Various coding, SQL, Python, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I use GPT for myself. I'm not a hardcore dev. I actually just got into it 6 months ago, and it is a Goliath when you're looking at it from someone that has never coded a day in your life. But what I've found is that you can ask GPT, or more specifically, you can speak to it and say, this is what I need to build functionality-wise. This is the language. Now, I tend to stick with Python. It's simple for me, and if it throws an error, I go ahead and I input that error back into GPT immediately, and you have to work with it here and there until you get it functioning properly. But in terms of business, there are quite a few use cases that are becoming more and more available that I want to share with you guys that you might not have thought of. So one of the things that GPT is excelling at right now is the ability to communicate just like a human, and it's getting way more sharp at that. The other night when we were using the newest version, it started speaking Spanish out of nowhere. So we're racking our brains trying to get it to speak English again, and we just simply asked it, why? Why are you speaking Spanish? And it cracked the funniest joke to me. It said, I just felt like having a little fiesta. I've been working all day. And for a virtual system to make me laugh that hard, I'm thoroughly impressed, because most people can't make me laugh like that. So in terms of the use for that, you might think, oh, well, it's cool. It's able to understand humor. But the deeper meaning of that is it's able to communicate just like a human and provide emotions to people, which is very powerful in terms of customer service. And some of the things that I've personally been playing around with is I like to build virtual rooms full of assistants. And each of them have their own personality, and you can present these virtual rooms with a problem that you're trying to solve. And how this correlates to business is you can then, if you provide a problem that needs a solution, you have 6 different opinions. Each bot that you create can have its own personality and its own expertise. And all you have to do is prompt it and tell it, this is your job. And we've figured out a really easy system to create a virtual neural network, so to say, using spreadsheets. You can store prompts inside of a spreadsheet system, and it's extremely user-friendly. Most people use spreadsheets for their jobs already. You learn how to use it in school. So imagine you go in and you put a prompt inside of a spreadsheet. You say your job is to manage the finances, and you create another one and you say your job is to manage transportation for our employees that we provide transportation for. And you can create several more that dive deep into those tasks. And then you create one that is kind of, we call it an admin bot. And so all of these bots will communicate in between each other. They pass a few solutions up to the admin bot, and then they pass that to you. In terms of your experience using it, all you do is ask it a question, but it's like creating very specific localized LLMs that can solve a problem. And it can be great for personal use, but on the business side, the biggest thing that devs or myself in general, what I'm looking to do is make something easier on a business. And especially if that business has good capital and they have a good running standing in the market, they will pay you. They will pay you to solve a problem and make something cheaper on them. So I'm not an advocate for putting people out of jobs. However, if something can be done by a bot and you find that it's useful, a business will pay you to do so. There's a way to go about it to where you don't make enemies doing it, but I'm talking about the monotonous tasks that you shouldn't be focusing on in the first place. Things like scheduling when you could be working on something a little bit more impactful. And so a good example is if there was a bot that was built that is supposed to look at all the drivers that are transporting medical patients to and from the hospital after their surgeries, and someone has to sit there and they have to monitor that all day long, they really could be doing something else for that same establishment that in terms of when they go home, they feel a little bit better. They're not doing a rat race job, like a very monotonous job. So we found that there's tons of use cases, and some of which haven't been discovered yet. I can't think of them all myself. We found use cases in real estate, in product management, inventory, scheduling, HR. We've even found use cases to where you can build a system that monitors surgeries and watches the video feed and documents it thoroughly, which helps the doctors because then everything that happens during a surgery is well documented, and anyone in the medical field understands deeply that the biggest thing you're going to be dealing with when things go wrong is lawsuits, and you need to have everything thoroughly documented. And so if it was your choice to pay a human to do that and they don't thoroughly enjoy that versus using a tool like GPT-4o to do the same job and do it better, I think I would choose the latter. However, the other really cool thing about this is it doesn't have to replace your job. You can use these tools to help you turn into a super employee, and it gives you an edge that most people they haven't thought of yet. They don't know it exists. And so what I'm curious about in this room is what are some use cases for that you guys could possibly think of?
I'm an art director and UX designer. I often use ChatGPT as like a brainstorming device.
Yes.
So I'll load it up with conversation, and I work independently often. So I'll load it up with conversations that I'm having or that I would have with another creator. And just bounce out 50 ideas on this topic, right? And then I'll follow it up with a question, and I'll follow it up with a question, just like an actual brainstorming session.
Two things that I've used it for that's extremely good at is getting financial advice, specifically tax law.
Yeah.
Where there's wealth of knowledge, and you have to double check everything. But you can ask the question in plain English, and it will give you all the terms, and you can search Google Translates, not just making this up. And also, foreign language translation is phenomenal. Foreign foreign language, if you're learning a foreign language, you can get it to explain concepts to you. It does it very well.
Does anybody know if the new version of GPT, for those of you that have peeked into it, do you know if it can live translate off of a video feed yet? One of the new features of GPT 4.0 is that you can technically, it's structured like a video chat. And instead of recording a video and then you submit it, you just hit that button and it pulls up a function where it's like being on FaceTime with ChatGPT, and it's able to understand the context of what's happening around you in the room. And although that might creep some people out, just being honest, myself being one of them, it's really good for monitoring. And you can say I'm here at Tech Alley and I'm having it pay attention to what's going on around me. Now, you don't want to do it while you're at home in the comfort of your own space and you're sitting there eating a bag of potato chips. But if you're out at a social event, how hard is it to remember every single conversation you had with people? In my case, I struggle with that sometimes. I have people walk up to me and they go, "Hi, Eric, it's good to see you again." And I go, "Again?" I don't, And so you can create personalized bots that do these tasks that we struggle with. And that's the point, is that a lot of people, in my opinion, they tend to put GPT in a box, but there's so many cases for it. And if you're able to kind of think outside of that box, you can automate and enhance most of the things that we struggle with as humans, because we have to sleep, we have to eat, we have emotions. GPT is getting close to having emotions, and that's a scary one. But what I mean by that is I can have it monitor every conversation that I have while I'm at Tech Alley and give me a summary when I get home. And then you can also give it a task and go, "All right, GPT, I'm working on these projects. Who do you think I should contact? What's their information?" You can even have it send the emails for you. And so all of these tasks that, we procrastinate as humans, but if you had a system helping you to do that, how productive can you really be? And so that's one of the really awesome things about this tech coming out, is even if you struggle with these abilities in your life, it can take you and kind of catapult you into the best version of yourself when it comes to business in terms of productivity and efficiency. And that's what most employers look for, is they look for people with great productivity and good efficiency and creative. And when you can create a room full of people giving you ideas privately, it gives you a really sharp edge against any competition, especially if you're independent. If you're working solo for any reason, not everyone is going to think to use that. And everyone has an opportunity right now to explore these concepts and put themselves ahead of the game. And personally, that's what I've been doing myself. It's been working out really well. For those of you that are just learning about coding, you can build fully functioning programs on GPT, and it was good before, but it's insane now. And to the point where it used to take me a few hours. Last night, I built a program in 15 minutes. Quick conversation, use detail, and Tim, you were telling me about prompt engineering. Do you have any input on that in your experience with prompt engineering?
Well, prompt engineering is basically the idea of getting an experienced business analyst to enhance the process of asking, creating a prompt, sending it off, getting back, and then integrating that with native functions. One of the presentations we did, what we talked about was Mary talking to her local LLM and the company saying, "Hey, pull my current marketing plan, summarize it, and send it to my team, my email." You think about what's involved in doing that. First, the LLM has to know who Mary is. It has to know what the marketing document is. Those are native functions, looking up the employee and what organizational role they have, and finding the document. Obviously, LLMs can summarize, but then finding out who her team is, and then using a native function to email the results in a personalized fashion to each team member, and also back to Mary saying, "I got the job done for you." Just all of those pieces are going beyond the simple prompt, "Hey, summarize this marketing document," right? So that's an example of prompt engineering. And what we do is we build these prompt engineering capabilities into the existing stack that a business is using to run their business. And so it's the middleware between the user and the back end being the LLMs that are executing this work and integrating the functions.
So how does that work? I mean, you don't, the LLMs don't really have a memory beyond the context window. So you have to just somehow summarize all the information and include it in the context window of every
There's actually two things, what you just said. First, there are perpetual chat agents. That's a term you should be.
Yeah, but there's still a finite context window.
Well, what a perpetual chat agent is a dynamic context window with a big background of the previous histories and the ability for each of those previous conversations to be summarized as a short document. That's vectorized and used as context for the current window. And as you move from subject matter to subject matter in your current conversation, what it's doing is it's finding those relevant previous conversations.
This retrieval augmentation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's sort of like RAG, but
it-
it's actually within the idea of managing the current context window to have access to a lot of previous context windows conversations that they can augment what your conversation objectives are. It can say, hey, you just said you wanted to go a holiday. You did this great trip to Laguna Beach last year, and you wanted something like that. It can know about your historical interactions and then use that to augment the current interaction.
So, I mean, that's a good hack for how LLMs work now, where you have this giant model where you put stuff in and stuff comes out. But wouldn't it be better to somehow tap into the middle of the model where it has a conceptual view of the context? And
That middle model is prompt engineering. That's the
No, not the middle of the model. So the model is like a stack of transformers. I'm talking about like
I understand. So what you're trying to say is
the
wouldn't it be
transformer
better?
and the transformer, and the sort of abstract
So-
level gets higher as you go down to the stack of transformers. So if you could somehow take the view of the context from the middle, that's a more conceptual view rather than, up here it's just tokens.
It's absolutely doable, and there are two existing technologies, both from OpenAI, that you can use today. The first is on the ChatGPT paid version the consumer has. They create their own GPTs. Have you played with that?
No, but isn't that just a system, a fixed system?
Well, what it is the
System
ability,
prompting?
what you can do is you create a transformer, GPT, for a particular subject matter.
Is it fine-tuned?
Yes. You can upload a document, you can upload initial prompts, you can say, this is the kind of agent I want you to be, your best agent, right? And then when you get a list of them. And so, for instance, if you're a programmer, you might have one that is, hey, I need help with my AWS templates. Or another one might be, hey, I need help with my C# code. Hey, I need help with my Python code, whatever. So it immediately establishes a context and a lot of background, brings all that in. And then so you can, when you do your initial question, it already knows that you selected the Python agent, knows you want to know about Python, and you can ask a question and it'll give you a relevant response.
Can you switch it just by starting your question with Python, period? And that's
Yes,
your
but that's
question?
and absolutely you can do that. And the problem with that is that you're doing it over time, and the amount of context you establish is therefore limited because how much work you want to do. With these transformers, you can actually upload entire documents. So we have much larger context windows than we used to have, guys. I mean, they've gotten really large.
Especially with every version that keeps coming out.
Yeah.
GPT is getting extremely good at understanding context deeply.
The other thing you can do, right back to you, is that you can, on the back end, you can create assistants. Assistants are these transformers that I just described that are available to the folks in front end on steroids. And you can actually build very sophisticated multi-agency types of engagement so that you could introduce far more contextual fine-tuning and management of the context window without the sort of an entirely in the middlware that OpenAI is providing, right? So that the end users of your GPT could actually be another system, your local internal system in-house. And it's calling all these assistants on this running on OpenAI. And then that simplifies your task as a prompt engineer of providing a good experience for the sort of line of business user, right? So at the end of the day, yeah, there's lots of ways to manage context, and a lot of that's done with prompt engineering techniques. And there are other tools out there, especially a couple from Microsoft, that are making this even more interesting. There's a lot of work going on here, and it's a foot race, a real foot race. I'm sorry, you had a question?
Well, yeah, I had a question just kind of on the big picture of organizing stuff. So I'm challenged by like, I'm working on coding. Wow, if I spend 10 minutes with ChatGPT, I get it done. I want to go back coding. Should I spend a half an hour learning ChatGPT? Because once I do that, I find out it's actually a 10 times game changer. But the way I organize my stuff is I think I got 4 or 4.5. On the left, I got 30 chats, one for ServiceNow, Java, Python, AWS, Azure. And I'm like, how do I organize that? Because I do all my ServiceNow in that one, 30 columns down on the left, right? I do my Java in that one down there. Would you recommend I do these custom agents?
You create what they call a GPT, your own personal GPT for each of those
like 30 agents maybe?
So in terms of UI, how they manage that is when you create a custom GPT, it pops up above all of those random conversations, by the way. So if you have one that helps you with your coding and another one that tells you what you should eat for the day to feel nice and good, which is what I do. I'm terrible at managing that. But yeah, it places it right at the top, and you can also then, once you have custom GPTs, if you create 100 of them, there's a search function as well.
Okay. Yeah. So there's then one more question on the just kind of the structure. So there's agents and then there's back office assistants. So these two different concepts or features.
Yes and no. You can in some ways these terms are interchangeable.
It's just two different ways to skin something.
Okay.
Well, he's not just talking about the difference between GPTs that you might build as an end user and the assistants, but also the agencies, which what this talk was about. And those are similar. Assistants can be orchestrated as a set of agencies. And the tooling for that from OpenAI is not substantial right now. Microsoft's working that it's a little more advanced, but hey, they're going to close the gap.
I just wanted to share actually 2 use cases. So I work for a consulting company, and our sales team's always asking for case studies.
Of course.
So we realized the only people who respond, so we use Slack. Anytime salespeople ask for case studies, it's only people like myself who've been with the company for 6-7 years who can be like, oh yeah, this is an example, or this. I realized this isn't scalable, so I scraped all of the case studies from our website, put it in a text file. We have a ChatGPT Enterprise subscription. I created a custom GPT, put the case studies in as a text file, so it really abstracts that whole vectorization process for you. And basically instructed that GPT, you are a case studies helper. People are going to ask you about case studies relevant to our company, just respond. And that's like the most popular GPT. It has over 100 chats open in our company.
So let me understand that process so that everybody can be on the same page. You have case studies which are a text, a document or something.
Yeah, like PDFs.
All right, you've asked it to summarize each of those, come up with a short summary description.
Actually, I didn't even summarize
You
them.
vectorized all of them?
I literally just, I put them into a giant text file. So
You're gonna hit a wall. One of the ways you might think about making that a more scalable solution is you ask ChatGPT to summarize each of those documents and then tokenize the summary as part of the context that's being searched. And you can also introduce a semantic library so that you can put that all in a little database that can be searched with RAG, as was mentioned earlier. So you can actually take what you did and scale it to where you have 10,000 case studies. You probably can get away with the technique the way you've done it with maybe 100 or a couple hundred, but I think it would probably start to fail.
So the context window for us right now is 128K.
Yeah, of course.
And the GPTs, the custom GPTs, and really open the API assistants I just described to people. That I literally, the next use case for that was, this is great, how can we use this in Slack? Because some people don't want to sign up for ChatGPT. It costs like $40 a user for us to give them ChatGPT access, whereas a sales guy is maybe not going to use that, they just want to use the case studies helper. So I took the case studies helper, converted it also into an API assistant.
Yes.
And that way now we're just paying per like API tokens when people query that. So I really just think that API assistance is like, how do I just take chats out of ChatGPT now and either create conversational web apps or Slack chatbots or things like that.
That's a great example of using that middleware in your organization to serve, an existing client. Did you build an extension on Slack for that? Or
Yeah, we created. But I wanted to actually just respond to your earlier comment about the context window. So you can, I believe, upload up to 20 files, up to 50 megs each. So that's pretty big. So 50 files up to 50 megs each, and that's a TXT, docx, PDF,
Yeah, you're just paying
XLSX.
more than you need to pay, so.
No, but when you upload that to the assistant, obviously there's a cost to that. On ChatGPT, it's abstracted. That's how because they charge you monthly. I've actually done a lot of testing. I agree with your advice. Like once you get to like 10,000 case studies, this is not going to scale. But given we have 100 case studies on there, the text file is like literally 64 kilobytes in size.
Sure.
The whole text file, like I stripped out all the graphics and everything. It's capable enough right now.
So what you can do is you can have tools that you can vectorize the case studies to create summaries, and you've got your vector of tokens, right? And you can then assemble those into a JSON document where you can have 100 case studies in one document, and then you can upload 50 of those. So that's one of the ways you can scale this. And the summaries can actually be, if you think about the kinds of questions that your salespeople ask, summaries can be tailored to answer, be useful in answering those questions. So you can say, summarize this with a focus on these key metrics, which are what the salesperson is likely to be looking for when they want a case study. Right? So you can make it a very structured pre-analysis that delivers a set of keywords and or descriptions. Could be English readable, that makes it easy. And that's a summary that you then include in this other document that is a collection of those, and that's what you upload as one of those 50 documents you have a limit to. So there are ways to break it up and summarize along the way to get the maximum use. By the way, that will also make your context window more flexible, because if you're having a chat as you go along, then remember everything that you said before in that chat has been passed into, you reach the limit that starts throwing stuff away. If you can have these short summaries in there, it can more intelligently discard of these different case studies that weren't of interest.
So honestly though, I understand exactly what you're saying. The concern I have is I'm seeing context windows growing at a faster pace than the cost of engineering that whole process for me to consider.
Oh, but there are tools that make that engineering I just talked about, basically. You can use
No,
ChatGPT for you.
You can build a bot that does that for you pretty quickly.
I think what I'm trying to say is like if I'm starting to engineer my data to cut out data, because that's effectively what's happening. Right? You're saying you have like 500 tokens, we want to make that 100 of the most relevant tokens for the purpose of the prompt, right? To give you the outcome. Am I understanding this correctly?
You're in the right direction, but there's one perspective I haven't articulated well enough, I guess, and that is that when you are summarizing all these use cases for the purpose of being good query candidates, your summary can be tailored to that. If you just take the whole document and tokenize throw it in, you're depending on, you're asking the LLM to do an enormous amount of extra work. It can still do it, but it'll be less efficient, it'll take longer, and it'll be more expensive.
Same work.
The same work, yes. But at the end of the day, you'll have less ultimately in terms of scalability to work with. So if you don't have the problem and it's less expensive just to throw every use case study you have in, it's fine. I didn't want everybody to think, oh, I got to throw all my entire use cases all in one. No, you don't.
I completely agree with you. I'm of the opinion right now where I'm still blown away at the capabilities of like 4, GPT-4, and Gemini 1.5. And so 1.5 has a 2 million context window now. So you can dump like hundreds, if not thousands, of like just large files into there as a part of a and like for me, cutting down context windows at the start, because I'm using the LLMs as almost like an analyst that I can't hire. And I'm not smart enough to figure out what to cut out of the original data, the source data. So I want to defer to the LLM as much as possible.
One way you could do that is ask ChatGPT to analyze. Here are the top 50 questions my salespeople ask. Know your audience, right? Go and find out what the questions are and give that to ChatGPT and say, okay, and here are some sample case studies across a variety of different industries we've addressed. What would be the best prompt to summarize each of those documents so that you could more efficiently find the answers to these questions? And it would do that work for you. So there, you're asking it to do in one fell swoop what would otherwise take it quite a bit of time and processing the worksheet.
I have a question for you again. So in terms of when you say you're leaning more towards not wanting to have it summarize this, is this strictly just because you don't want to lose data when it does summarize it?
Yeah, because like the data I'm pulling in is like I don't know what it is half the time. Like I didn't read all these case studies. I don't know. I understand actually.
You can build a bot that reads all the case studies.
Yeah,
but
by the way, you're not losing any data.
it's very good at summarizing. Very good.
Like again, it's a
No,
simple example. If I have a
You need to understand how LLMs work. You're not losing any data. Because what you're doing is you are doing exactly the same process the LLM would have done with a larger context document. You're just doing it in advance. It's doing the job once instead of many, many times. The math here is around the correlation matrices that drive the underlying language processing model. Okay, and the semantic networks that are being developed are statistical in nature. So if you summarize in advance, you're doing what the LLM is going to do later anyway. And you still have the original document they can pull into context window when it needs it. So
Okay.
you're just breaking it up into
there's a
steps.
retrieval function.
So-
You're saying build in a retrieval
What
function.
RAG-
all as
what RAG-
Well, you just ID both and you group them, and then it can look at the summary, or if you need more context, it'll pull the full doc.
Okay.
Do you know what RAG is, by the way?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm very
it-
familiar with RAG.
yeah.
I think from again, I'm looking at this from a cost of like me doing the work. Like for me to go and now set up a vector database and then set up that whole database process versus me, yeah, I'm not trying to
If I had
say
100 documents,
just dumping in the files to the context window of those stupid LLMs do this. It does it for me. And I'm like, cool, everyone's happy, the data have the back.
So you don't work for Ernst Young. 10,000.
And I mean, now that the offline models are getting more robust as well, and there's a lot of discussion I'm hearing even from my customers about we're tired of using the online models, how do we bring this back?
All right, Grok, yeah, sure.
Because like Amazon has Bedrock, Vertex AI from Google, and Microsoft has Azure AI Studio as well.
Bedrock's cloud-based, it's not local.
Well, Amazon Bedrock is effectively a platform for you to host multiple models.
Yes, it is,
So they
but
have-
you mentioned it local, and it's not.
Well, it's local in the conventional sense that you're managing yourself. You're just paying for the GPU-enabled instance.
Okay.
So you're not paying like so I'm paying OpenAI like whatever 6 cents every 1,000 tokens, right? The minute I start running Bedrock, I'm just paying a GPU like whatever 40 cents an hour, no matter how much computational load I'm putting on it.
Absolutely, and they also have the service model where you pay for only what you use and it's pay-as-you-go, which is not the same.
Yeah,
So there are a
that's
variety
true.
of different pricing models and
That's true.
AWS services. So I don't think they have to use their GPU.
How do those numbers compare? Like,
So,
4
at a-
cents.
At a certain scale, also like some companies just don't want their data going to the online models anyways, so it's a non-starter. But at a certain scale, if you're really doing a lot of this RAG analysis and it's really starting, the API costs are adding up, it's worth doing an analysis if I were to just run a similarly priced model on my own GPU-enabled instance. It'll probably cost you a lot less, especially if you're constantly hitting your LLM.
Why would you trust Amazon but not OpenAI?
It's not a matter of trust. Okay, so trust is a good question. So again, let's say I'm a bank or a healthcare company. I can't send HIPAA data to OpenAI right now.
So they're not HIPAA compliant.
So yeah, so as a part of
Amazon is.
Amazon can be HIPAA compliant if you're running things on your own instances. And actually, forget Amazon. You can go to the Best Buy, buy a computer with like a 4080 in it, like an RTX 4080, and just run the model in your own house. And then at that point, the cost is whatever you spent on the box plus the electricity.
You know, I think you just gave me a fodder for another talk. Because the security and who can I trust and where's my data live has come up in almost every one of the meetings that we've had.
That's the biggest question that I get asked.
Trust, though. Like, HIPAA is regulatory, and then trust is the
My
one.
background's in fintech and other regulated industries, so I totally understand and
But
actually.
they're almost orthogonal in a way. I mean, they're similar, but
Yes and no. That's why it's a good fodder for a talk,
Yeah.
because I can explore that. And we've got security experts sitting right over here.
Yeah, when you talk about
Chris, you and I, we should get together and do that. Okay?
yeah.
because I got a couple 4080s for my flight simulators. How powerful are they for getting this stuff done?
They're very powerful, although if you're kind of taking a gaming card and using it for, running the models. There are actually cards that are not for gaming, that are specific for the models. They're a little more expensive.
So for 4080, how much hour would it cost?
4080 is a great card.
So you got two 4080s?
Yeah.
You could run your fine.
I mean, that's a good consumer card to use for that.
Flight simulators with that.
Yeah, I I got triple 4K monitors.
There you go. Okay, so you're
I got a 12 gig 3060 and I run the models and you put part of it in the GPU and the rest of the RAM.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Actually, Matt, who was going to do the presentation today, to make it, has, we should ask him that question when he comes next time, because he's got an amazing own lab, and he's now sort of launching a little business where he's selling access to those resources. I had a question for you. I haven't looked at the latest 4.0 in terms of the context window. They were testing a 1 million token context window. Have they gotten there with 4.0? Is it available on the back end?
I'm not sure on the back end, but I can say it's doing.
I know they haven't released it to the public, but I thought for assistance they might have. No?
All I've noticed is that in general use, it's a lot more smooth in understanding context. Just based off of like on the front end, on the consumer side, it's a lot more fluid with it, especially with
Twice as fast, too.
yeah with the outputs and half the cost.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So I want to go back to security and compliance.
Sure.
Being part of my background in race school. So we're talking about hospital data, patient information, private information. Where does all this reside? Because at some point, it's a liability.
I'll give you, because this is a very it's a great subject for a longer talk, but the high level, first of all, if you're using the consumer version of ChatGPT, they are allowed to use any of your prompts as training material. So if you're building these GPTs, your own GPTs, and you're interacting with them, or you put them in the new store, and other people interact with them, all of that interaction can and will be used for training purposes. Right? So if we're doing the consumer thing, there's no privacy. Don't put anything in there you don't want somebody to train on. There's a whole other conversation about whether they retain any of that data long term. That's another conversation. They are encrypting it at rest, and they could argue that it's protected and so on and so forth because they're using it for training. Who the hell knows where it's going to get spit out at the other end? Assistance with OpenAI, on the other hand, is quite different. You can actually train on your own materials, and it will enhance the model, and that stuff is not used outside of your organization's API. And there are quite a lot of stipulations they have about exactly what that means. And it's the basis for any kind of conversation you might have around trust. The other side of it is compliance. Services to be compliant, it depends, there's lots of different compliance regulatory pressures that come to bear. AWS is far and away the most compliant platform out there. Azure is slowly catching up. Google, GCP was so far behind the curve on this when we were in the fintech world, we didn't even consider it. But I think they may have improved. I just haven't looked at them lately. But AWS, you can build systems that are compliant enough to work with banks and with GovRamp, work with the government, and also with HIPAA. Not every service. There's actually a big matrix where you can go in and see how every service stacks up in terms of compliance.
People should be aware of that so they can cover themselves.
You need to actually have, if you are in a business where compliance is important to you, then you probably have a CISO. And what a CISO, Chief Security Information Officer, will do is go in and understand all this in great detail and actually say to your development team and architects, you can use this, you can use this, you can't use that, and so on and so forth. So there is a whole process. If you're a SME, small, medium-sized enterprise, and you're not in a highly regulated industry, then you're probably okay just using common sense.
But I think also because what I'm seeing right now, like I was just playing with, Google as a service right now where you can see if your information is in the dark web.
Yeah.
And mine just came up because it looks like AT&T, like in March, so 2 months ago,
They had the big
got their
breach.
data stolen.
Yeah.
And so now, my name, my social security, all
Yep.
that stuff is out there.
Lovely.
And I think, I've been in that line of business in fintech too, and my advice to everybody is that, like, if information is traced back, how comfortable are you that someone could come to you and say, my information is on the dark web because you didn't protect my information, even if it was, your name, address, and date of birth and things like that. And you don't want to be in that situation. So I'm saying, like, people should be aware and either encrypt or, in my business, I remember at first, when you get excited about the data, you want to get as much as possible. And then eventually, your manager tells you, get just what you need, need to know basis. So if you
Right.
don't need a social security number,
Don't ask
ask
for
for it. But I mean, like, it's not, because people get excited about the data, so usually they want to get as much as possible.
Well,
So-
there's a whole subject, whole breadth of subjects that come under the umbrella that you just popped up, okay? And it is raining.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
There is the acid rain, you can
Yeah.
really get screwed around with. Personally identifiable information is covered in the United States primarily by the CACPA, which is California Consumer Protection Act. And if the companies like AT&T, for instance, have a breach and it was associated with California operations, which almost certainly it is in this case, then they are literally on the hook for many thousands of dollars per breach if they are found to have been negligent in the handling of the personal information.
how is that necessarily?
So my point was that as a company, which we were talking about from the perspective of a company, not just an individual, it pays not to make a mistake here because the financial risk here.
But for most businesses, I mean, that's the first, it's good, what they call now RCSA, right? Self risk compliance,
Yeah.
self assessment, where people should be aware of that as a step number one. So they're only collecting what they need, but also because now everything is going to be traceable, I'm sure, more and more. So you don't want people to come back to that business and say, this happened to me because you didn't protect my data.
Right.
And what I'm saying is that people should at least be aware of it, right?
Yeah,
And just
I
not
totally agree.
just say, oh, I'm uploading this, I'm uploading that, I'm playing with ChatGPT, and oops, that was PII, but there you go.
What's the dark web? 'Cause I'm with a healthcare company, United Healthcare, I consult for them, and they had the breach with Change.
Yeah.
It was a ransomware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't find out really what happened until the CEO went to Congress, right?
Yeah.
Turns out there was
Right.
$22 million ransomware, and it still got pushed to the dark web. And then the cause was they didn't have MFA, which is basic security type stuff. But
Well, there's so many horror stories here.
But the question about the dark web, if my stuff's on the dark web, what does that mean? Does that just mean,
Well, the dark
Means
web,
nothing.
the dark web are just websites that are identified primarily by IP address and are found by data servers. In the short, that's what it is. So they're not easily found. You have to know what you're looking for, and you're using an IP address. Right?
It's traded by thugs, basically.
But I
Pretty
think
much, yeah.
our information is very good.
Yeah, in fact, if you don't trust US company, because usually they prefer to pay a fine because they make money on your data, right? So they prefer to pay a fine for it. And then if you don't trust US company, you can also use European company that are more stronger on security and privacy, like Mistral AI is a very strong competitor of OpenAI. They are all language model, open source one, and then we really focus really seriously on privacy and security.
But I think also what I do, and it's a little bit on a tangent, but it's very clear. I mean, for me, business and being in the fintech business, I used to work for Wells Fargo, but all our information is out there. And I think if you don't freeze, everybody should freeze their credit card, right? You go and you should do that. That means nobody can open.
You mean freeze the credit bureau reports, not.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, freeze. That's for your credit cards or any loan. For
So
instance.
nobody can do a poll.
Exactly, and you have to, even if you personally, then you lock it, you can lock it permanently. If you need to apply for a credit card, you go to Equifax or Experian and you unlock it for 24 hours and you apply for a loan. But at least it's a safeguard that nobody can do that for you. And if you don't do that already, you should do that, it's free. And it saves you a lot of trouble.
It took an act of Congress to make it free.
Yeah, and you should check your credit report. A third of them have errors, and that's my concern for a lot of people because you can be a very hot mess, and it just takes a very long time to fix. So
Upload a chat.
Yeah,
The
problem of trust is really getting stronger and stronger every day because I saw a news yesterday, Slack, that is owned by Salesforce, they are using your data for training AI, even the private messages. So there's a lot of debate on that because
Did you want to talk about what you're considering doing?
I'll mention it. It's pre-development right now, but
Why don't you do it next time? I really think it'd be good.
absolutely.
What's
So,
that did you say?
Slack.
Slack.
Slack is
Any other questions for Eric? Or
Just wanted to comment on that real quick. So the government, they know that data breaches sometimes happen because threats evolve every day. Big things to make sure are to have documented proof that you've done some due diligence and also to be truthful. Because there's not a one-size-fits-all like penalty or action. Depends on what the investigation shows. If the investigation shows that you knew there was a breach, you didn't report it for 6 months, like say that person complained, hey, my data's on the dark web, you did nothing about it, and then they went to their state attorney general and reported it, that's already off to a bad start.
If that's enforceable, I mean, I like, which business hasn't been hacked right now? Even like look at Caesars, for instance. I mean, all companies have been hacked. I mean,
SEC.
it just was.
Well, actually,
Yeah, they were.
Chris's point is well articulated, and I've had some personal experience with this, and basically what companies need to be able to show is that they have done due diligence, that they have put a plan in place, and while they know they might have areas of exposure, they're working to close those areas, and that they're working in a reasonably expeditious way. The government is not saying you have to close every security leak and reduce your
No, that's right.
attack vectors to zero today. They're saying, look, you need to be making a good effort to move in this direction.
But downstream from that,
It's not impossible to show good faith. It is
Right.
impossible to close all.
Yes,
leaks.
that's-
but I mean, downstream from that, every single one of us as a consumer, we need to take this step. to
Yeah, buyer
protect
beware,
ourselves.
right?
Because a lot of people are not aware of this, and it's,
It's true.
you know.
MFA everything.
Oh, there's one.
I just want to add that the context of these LLMs is these AI tools. There's ways to run them in the context of just how you would secure your traditional data center. The same principles apply to how you'd secure an LLM. If you were running it in say the offline mode, like it's really just an extension of a compute.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to give you an example to show you why I disagree with you. Because the typical business process where you go in and have a form where you collect information from the user, it's a structured interchange of information where you have specifically asked for, and you're able to take and store properly and manage the data you collected. An LLM is a very different kind of conversation engagement with the consumer, and they can say anything. They can upload their medical records or something. You would expect it. And so the burden on the provider of the service that the chat is associated with is now a much higher bar. And so you almost have to be the next level of aggressive and
Right.
sort of closing any of the potential, attack vectors so that you don't get, because you don't have control of your user, right?
Right.
If you look at support chat technology, a lot of those chats are not maintained for any length of time. They're stored, they're encrypted in transit, they're stored encrypted, and then they're purged after a period of time. The reason is the company doesn't want to have the exposure of anything that might have been disclosed in that support chat. For the consumer, that's a bad thing because they want to go back. Last year I had this problem with my printer. I wanted to see my support, and it's not there anymore. There's a reason for that. It's the company managing the data such that they're not exposed.
I think we're kind of saying the same thing here. Like, I'm really just talking about, like, if traditionally companies put a moat, like they have an intranet, right? They have like a firewall and they don't let anyone just like, if I'm a bank and I wanted to use an LLM and I already have investments into like.
So
data center.
security through restricted access and secure access, okay.
Well, the same mechanisms that keep systems secure today, I'm trying to put it because you were appointed as a security guy, like they still apply because you're still running, like they're all just, all these LLMs, they just run on Linux. You see what I'm saying? Like if there's a vector database, it's a vector database. It's just another type of database that runs on a server. There's still a network layer. It's IP networking connecting everything together.
I do think you're both correct in different terminology. Like I do look at it the same way you do, as it's a software application.
Yeah.
And data's going in it. But as you said, it's more unstructured. So you have to account for that, come up with that, your security controls.
Yeah, the one area which I think where is emerging is people exfiltrating personally identifiable information or company secrets from
Data
fine-tuning
leakage,
models.
yeah, it's a big deal.
That's the one area where I'll say like, okay, that's something new. Security researchers are still wrapping their minds around how do we. And I think like the safest bet I always go for when I'm consulting people is don't engage in multi-tenancy with your models. So let's say you're a service provider to Pepsi and Coke. Don't build one LLM for Pepsi and Coke. Build a Coke LLM, build a Pepsi LLM. Because what if like Coke
when you say build an LLM,
yes,
what do you mean? Because you're not going to go train a multi-billion parameter LLM.
No, that's exactly right.
$15 million.
That's exactly what I do. Yeah.
No, that's
Well, it might be the same one, you just have some separations in place.
Well, like I said with AI, the open AI assistants and being able to upload your own document set, that doesn't find its way back into the host foundational model. It is absolutely on top of and separate from. So that would be the right approach for addressing companies that have different sets of specific information that they do auto-tuning on.
What about fine-tuning with LoRa's? Because you can swap those in at runtime. So like you have your base model and then a code LoRa.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Doing that, yes. Both it used to be called fine-tuning and it's called,
Well, LoRa's is different because that's a small file that goes on top of the base model to modify it, basically to make it more Pepsi friendly, more Coke friendly.
What is?
It's called LoRa, it stands for low rank.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's just one of the 5 or 6 different auto-tuning approaches.
I honestly wouldn't dismiss
It's been a while since I've
I wouldn't dismiss the whole creating your own model as something like ridiculous. People like I do this daily as a part of my job.
I have a story for you. We're working with some folks in UAE,
Yeah.
and they use 15% of the overall AWS capacity worldwide to train their model.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? That's crazy. Well, they have so much money it doesn't matter.
But I think like data retention, you know, we were talking about that and compliance race.
Well, there's
could be
data
a good topic,
retention,
right?
data leakage, and there's business continuity, and there's a whole bunch of
And
factors.
potentially
that play all this.
remediation if something happens. That would be a good topic maybe for AI.
Put it on the list. Trish and I got him roped in. He doesn't know it yet, but
Yeah, we've got another meeting
Yeah,
this
we'll
Monday
do
to talk
it.
about different security.
I think what we should do, I want to hear if everybody's interested, because security is something of a dry subject sometimes. If we were to present a presentation on security considerations in the use and fielding of, LLM applications, would that be something everybody would find interesting? How many? Show of hands? A few? Okay, good, great, we'll do it.
And also potentially was saying like remediation. If
Sure.
something happens,
That would be part of
like
it.
if you're the person who's using for your business AI and then you realize you made a mistake, like what do you do? What's the remediation plan?
Well,
Is there somebody you need to reach
First,
out?
you have to get rid of all the dead bodies that you do. You shoot some people, right?
You know what I think is going to be relevant in AI? Maybe some companies already are taking this into account, like OpenAI, for example. We focus a lot on pen tests to see if anyone can get in from the outside.
Yeah, sure.
I think we're going to also be seeing more audits to make sure that a certain piece of data that's input is truly not in their system. Like, just let's put in this test data, bring in those auditors, like those internal pen testers, and just see if it exists in their system. Because I think a lot of people don't believe
Chris, isn't there-
certain things are in the system.
Because
Your query,
Just run without a hard drive, you're done.
query,
Well,
there's a places out where we have unstructured data, like in a data lake.
Yeah.
And you have a set of queries. They go and look to see if they can retrieve
Yeah.
inappropriate information is a term for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the term is.
Query something. But anyway, yeah,
Part of our briefing.
it's a kind of test. It's not pen test, but it's like a retrieval test. Inappropriate.
Yeah, it's just a means of giving someone assurance that they're truly, like a third-party assurance that they truly are not keeping that data.
Let's have ChatGPT write all those queries for us.
Exactly.
Because, do you remember when I had this ask to create like the Super Mario, like the copyright infringement example I had like
Yes.
a few months back? So clearly, there's a flaw somewhere that allowed to generate a picture of Superman or the Mario Brothers that I had. So that's why, when I'm thinking about that, I'm like, what else is being retained or used that's being uploaded?
That's a great example of exactly that
Right.
process of testing.
That's
your-
right. So
your models
the pen
to find
test
out
you were
if
talking
they're
about
appropriate
is
information.
that right? Because because obviously they have issues because their system is not perfect. So maybe you may not have, but maybe your information was already uploaded by somewhere in Germany or whatever that had access to dark web information about you, and now, you know, ChatGPT is using that to provide answers using your information.
Yeah, okay.
Well, actually, I think what you just said just made me realize that's the question is, how anonymized is the information that ChatGPT used? Because it pulled a lot of information, and I caught it using word-for-word Quora answers. So my question is, how anonymized was all this information?
Well, depends, you know the old Gigo garbage.
How much of it is anonymous?
Well, how do you make something anonymous?
Like stripping who
Well,
the
but-
user
so-
was that made it, or the person's
Right.
information?
So you're talking about stripping context from it?
What?
You're talking about stripping technically as much context as you can from the data?
Not context of what the person, who the person
Exactly,
was.
who is that coming
That would be
from?
context.
The source. And this is why, you know, like, having worked in banking for so many years, you know, like, one of the safest database that was ever at the beginning was banking, right? Because you have to have that secure, so that was like top level. And I remember when I first worked in banking, you know, you had access to account numbers, you had access to names, you had access to social security. I'm talking about, you know, 25 years ago. But of course, you know, they anonymized even their customers. So meaning like, you know, you were not Eric, you were, you know, an account key and a customer key.
Right.
And then only people that really had to see who you were behind it had clearance to do that, right? So my point is that like is that's what, you know, David was saying about, you know, anonymity with ChatGPT is that like ideally if I am uploading information about you, it should be, you know, masked. So, right? Am I going on a tangent?
No, you're making complete sense, especially with the new tools coming out. Like I said, one of which where it can understand context of what's happening around you in your daily life. If you're using that tool, GPT is going to have an understanding of who you are naturally, and so it is a security concern of understanding how much of that data is being tied to me and is it accessible anywhere else.
Okay, we're coming up on lunchtime, so maybe one last question. Who's got a ringer? Good question. Chris?
So we hear a lot about people saying, oh, is OpenAI close to AGI, which is like the next level of AI. Can you give us some insight into why that's so significant? Some things that would change the world because of like be different than what
So Kurzweil, I think he wrote a book called Singularity. Who have read Kurzweil's book, Singularity? Oh wow, come on guys. You gotta read this book. You know who Ray Kurzweil is?
Yes.
Okay, Ray Kurzweil has been in the business of making predictions of how technology is going to advance and how it will impact our lives for like 40 years, and he has a very high rate of being right. Because the way he talks about the way he does it is that he says, look, let's just take the trends that we currently see and believe that they're going to continue, and if they do continue, what would be the possible outcome of that? One of his key focuses is the singularity that occurs when AGI arrives and what impact will be on it. So to answer your question, well, what does AGI mean? Well, we're getting a lot of buzz around AGI right now in terms of the level of intelligence on the part of these foundational models, these transformers, LLMs being one example of those, that can replicate or exceed human capabilities, right? I don't know about you, but GPT's already better at some things than I am, right? And it's just a matter of expanding that until the point of what they talk about as a consciousness emerging, where the AGI not only is as good as a human at doing any individual things, it can actually choose what things it should be working on. It can actually make value judgments about the value of the work that it's doing. It can be self-motivated. When that happens, it could invent stuff. Well, it's already inventing stuff. That's actually, no, there are inventions that AGI, that foundational models have generated that are patentable. For instance, that's invention.
I thought the patent office said you couldn't patent. Oh no, that's copyright.
No, they actually, you're right, there are regulations they're talking about now, can AGIs, so LLMs generate.
There's no reason that should be backable.
Well, that's another conversation, but the point is that the material rises to the level of something that the patent office, if it was coming from a human, would have patented. That's really the key, right? Is it as good as a human? Have you ever gotten a patent? You know what kind of pain they put you
That's not
through?
saying much.
Yeah. Well, actually, we get a utility
Those
patent.
patents are useless.
Can be. But the point I was, just to close that off, the point about AGI and its impact is that the concern is that that motivation, that decision to pursue certain portions of effort, we don't know what they're going to be. Are we going to be their pets? Are we going to be the cherished children? Or are we going to augment ourselves and start installing stuff in our head and become something? Who knows? But we're a long ways maybe from some of that. Kurzweil was it 20, I think he said 2030 or 2035, Ross, do you remember? When Kurzweil said the singularity was likely to occur. And
well, a singularity he originally predicted was 2030, but he pushed it back a couple of years.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know that completely, but that's a great, if you want to answer it in whatever you can possibly do, read Kurzweil's work.
Do you want to speculate wildly on what you think 5 will be on? ChatGPT 5.
It'll make you breakfast.
No, I don't feel like I have.
Come on.
No, I just don't feel like I have the background. Did you see my last month's discussion about Web 4.0? I think that's a lot more important than the advances in LLMs are going to do. We were looking at a whole sea change. It's on techalley.org YouTube channel, and basically what we talk about is LLMs talking to LLMs. And that's going to change the way the entire web works, in my opinion. So if you want to get way out over the tips of the skis with me, that would be the one to watch.
Do you think LLMs talking to APIs would be?
That's interim. That's going to be so. When was the last time you used a phone book kind of thing? Our kids would go like, "You did what? You actually had to open a book and find stuff."
That's all we do at the moment with what I've been building.
Well, I mean, all this UI is built for humans to look at. Why wouldn't
It's going to change.
Why wouldn't the agent just use the
When I
JSON
would lunch,
API?
I'll give you the short version of my.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so guys, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time.